The first rays of dawn always found Beatrice awake, her 68-year-old body protesting with familiar aches as she eased herself out of bed. The quiet creak of the floorboards beneath her feet was a symphony she knew well, a daily prelude to the stillness of her small cottage on the outskirts of Willow Creek. For years, ever since her beloved Arthur passed, leaving her a widow and a retired librarian, this early morning ritual had been her constant. It was a habit born from the bustling years when Arthur was alive, and they'd rise before the sun to prepare for their children's school days. Now, Arthur had been gone for 7 years, and the children were long grown, but Beatrice still found herself in the kitchen by 6, the kettle whistling a lonely tune for her solitary cup of chamomile tea. The mornings in her now too quiet home held a peculiar silence. Sometimes it was a comforting quiet, a space for reflection and gentle memories. Other times it was a heavy, suffocating quiet, a stark reminder of the void Arthur had left behind. Today, however, the silence felt charged with a different kind of pressure. It was a Tuesday, which meant her daughter Clara would be arriving this afternoon. Clara, her youngest, was a whirlwind of ambition and demands, always on the go, always with a new project or a new need. Today, the need was particularly significant. Clara was getting married. Beatrice sighed, her gaze drifting to the small, overgrown garden outside her window. The rose bushes, once Arthur's pride, were now choked with weeds. Her back wasn't what it used to be, and Clara, despite her fervent planning for a lavish wedding, rarely offered to help with anything beyond her own immediate needs. Her son Daniel was equally distant. He worked in finance, always busy, always important. He'd married a woman named Serena, who, like Clara, seemed to view Beatrice as a convenient resource rather than a person with her own life. The phone rang, jolting Beatrice from her thoughts. It was Clara. "Mom, hi! Listen, I'm swamped with wedding stuff today. The florist needs to finalize the centerpieces, and I have a dress fitting. You don't mind, do you?" Clara's voice was bright, a little breathless, as if she were already running late. "Mind what, dear?" Beatrice asked, though she already knew. "Oh, just being available. For anything. I might need you to run some errands, pick up a few things. You're the best mom, really." Beatrice bit back the familiar protest. Saying no to Clara was like trying to stop a hurricane with a teacup. It would only lead to a torrent of sighs, guilt trips, and thinly veiled hints about how stressful wedding planning was, how much she was doing alone, how much she needed her mother's support. "Of course, Clara," Beatrice replied, her voice flat. "Whatever you need." A wave of relief washed over Clara's end of the line. "Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver. I'll text you the list. Gotta run. Love you." And with that, she was gone, leaving Beatrice with a buzzing phone and a growing sense of dread. Beatrice had plans for today. Her book club was meeting at the library, and they were discussing a new historical fiction novel she'd been eagerly anticipating. The meeting started at 2. Now she'd miss it. Again. She sighed, her gaze returning to the neglected garden. What plans could a retired widow have anyway? That's what Clara and Daniel thought. Her life, it seemed, was merely a backdrop for theirs. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning passed in a flurry of minor tasks, all dictated by Clara's increasingly frequent texts. First, a trip to the bridal shop to pick up a swatch of fabric. Then, a stop at the bakery for a tasting of wedding cake samples. Beatrice, despite her aching knees, dutifully navigated the bustling streets of Willow Creek, her mind a quiet hum of resentment. Each errand, each polite smile she offered to the enthusiastic wedding vendors, felt like another thread tightening around her, binding her ever more firmly to Clara's grand plans. By 1 o'clock, Beatrice was back home, the cake samples carefully placed in the refrigerator. She sank onto her worn armchair, trying to find a moment of peace before the next directive arrived. The phone rang again, startling her. It was Daniel. "Mom, are you home?" "I'm coming over in an hour. I need to talk to you." His voice was unusually tense, a tremor of urgency that immediately put Beatrice on edge. Daniel rarely called unless he needed something substantial. The last time, It had been a request to co-sign a loan for a new car, a request Beatrice had politely but firmly declined. She made a fresh pot of tea and arranged the remaining cake samples on a plate, tidying the living room even though it was already spotless. Daniel arrived precisely an hour later, alone, without Serena. This was unusual. He typically used visits to Beatrice as an opportunity for Serena to have a break from their demanding toddler, Leo. "Mom," he said, kissing her cheek, his eyes scanning the room, "how are you?" "Fine, thank you," Beatrice replied, though her knee was throbbing and her blood pressure felt elevated. "How's Serena? How's little Leo?" Daniel waved an impatient hand, dismissing the pleasantries. "They're fine, Mom. Look, I wanted to talk to you about something important." They sat in the living room. Beatrice poured him tea, but he didn't touch the cup. His gaze wandered around the room, settling on the framed photographs on the mantelpiece. Clara and Daniel as children, Arthur in the garden, their last family picture from the Christmas before he passed. "Mother," Daniel finally began, looking her straight in the eye, "you know Clara's wedding is just a few months away." Beatrice nodded, a knot forming in her stomach. "Yes, of course, she talks of little else." "Right. Well, Clara and we've been thinking a lot about her future. About this wedding. She wants it to be perfect, a truly memorable day. And you know how expensive these things are getting?" He paused, taking a breath. "You see, Mom, we've decided to ask for your help. A significant contribution, actually." Beatrice stared at her son, a cold dread seeping into her bones. "My help? What kind of help?" "Your savings, Mom," Daniel said, his voice softening, a practiced persuasive tone. "The money you have from when you and Dad sold the old house. It's just sitting there, isn't it? And Clara, she needs it for her wedding. To make it everything she's ever dreamed of." Beatrice felt as if she'd been plunged into an icy bath. Her savings, the money she had meticulously managed since Arthur's death, her safety net, her independence, her future. She had moved into this smaller cottage, and the rest of the money was her security. "My savings," she repeated, the words barely a whisper. "What about my savings, Daniel?" "Mom," he leaned forward, his voice earnest. "You're not young anymore. You don't need all that money. And Clara is your daughter, your flesh and blood. This is her big day. We're talking about her wedding, Mom. Your contribution to her future, to her happiness." He spoke as if it were the most natural thing in the world, a simple, obvious request. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Beatrice felt a surge of anger, hot and unfamiliar, rising within her. She gripped the arms of her chair, trying to steady herself. "What exactly are you suggesting, Daniel?" she asked, her voice surprisingly calm despite the turmoil inside. "We'll set up a special fund for the wedding, in Clara's name," he continued, oblivious to her rising fury. "It would be your gift, your contribution to her new life. Think of it, Mom, a truly grand wedding, all thanks to you." He smiled, a confident, almost triumphant smile. Beatrice looked at her son, and she didn't recognize him. When had he become like this? When had he decided he could simply walk in and demand her money, money that she and Arthur had worked and saved for their entire lives? "Daniel," she said, her voice firm now, "this is a serious request. I need to think about it." "What is there to think about, Mother?" His voice hardened, impatience creeping in. "You don't spend that money anyway. It's just sitting in an account. And Clara needs it. For the wedding. For her future." "I need to think about it," Beatrice repeated, her gaze unwavering. "It's a very big decision." Daniel sighed, but then his face softened again, returning to his persuasive mask. "Of course, Mother. Think about it. But not for too long. We want to announce the main financial contributions at the engagement party next month." He stood up, kissed her cheek, and left without touching the tea or the cake. Beatrice remained seated in the living room, staring at the closed door. Something in Daniel's behavior alarmed her. His insistence, His impatience, the way he spoke of her money as if it were already theirs. There was something deeply wrong here. That evening, Clara called. "Mom," she said, without even a greeting, "Daniel said he spoke to you about the wedding funds." "So you two are in cahoots," Beatrice thought. "Clara and Daniel have been discussing my money behind my back." "Yes, he was here today," Beatrice replied. "So what did you decide?" Clara's voice was laced with an eager anticipation that grated on Beatrice's nerves. "I said I needed to think about it," Beatrice stated, trying to keep her voice neutral. Clara sighed dramatically. "Mom, what's there to think about? It's for my wedding. Don't you want me to have a beautiful, memorable day?" "What about my future?" Beatrice asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. "What about my own needs?" There was a pause, a beat of stunned silence on the other end. "That's different, Mom," Clara finally said, her voice regaining its usual confident tone. "This is my wedding. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. And that money is just sitting there. You're not going to spend it, are you?" Beatrice felt the anger building inside her again, a slow, simmering rage. Her children, her own flesh and blood, thought they could control her money, her life. They didn't even ask if she had any plans of her own for that money. They had simply decided that at her age, there could be no plans. She was merely a resource, a bank account to be tapped. "I'll think about it, Clara," Beatrice said, her voice strained, and she hung up without waiting for her daughter's reply. That night, sleep eluded Beatrice. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the day's conversations. She thought about her life, about how she had always put her children first, how she had given up her own aspirations for them. And now that they were grown, they saw her only as a convenient babysitter and a source of money. Something inside of her was breaking. She couldn't live like this anymore. She couldn't let them use her, drain her, strip her of the last vestiges of her independence. She couldn't give up her savings, her future. Beatrice got out of bed, walked to her old writing desk, and pulled out a blank notebook. She picked up a pen, her hand trembling slightly. She began to write not a letter, but a plan. A plan that would change her life, and perhaps her children's lives too. A plan that would make them realize that she was not just an old woman to be bossed around. She was Beatrice Holloway, and she deserved respect. By morning, the plan was ready. She set her pen aside and looked out the window, where the sky was just beginning to lighten. For the first time in a long time, Beatrice felt alive, full of a fierce determination. The feeling was intoxicating and terrifying at the same time, but she knew she was doing the right thing. She would no longer sacrifice herself for children who took her for granted. It was time to think about herself. It was time to start living for herself. And she knew exactly where to begin. The next morning, Beatrice woke earlier than usual. It was still dark outside, but her mind was wide awake, buzzing with the raw emotions of the previous night. Daniel's words, "Give up your savings for my baby," echoed in her ears. No, that was the original story. Here, it was, "Give up your savings for my daughter's wedding." Not a request, but a demand, delivered with an air of absolute entitlement. It was as if she, his mother, was merely a vault of money that could be plundered at will. Beatrice eased herself out of bed, wincing as a familiar twinge shot through her left knee. She walked to the window. The faint glow of the street lamp illuminated the small garden she'd cultivated over the years, a labor of love that now seemed to mirror her own neglected spirit. Every rosebush, every patch of lavender, every climbing vine reminded her of a different period of her life. The hardy hydrangeas for the early frugal years of her marriage to Arthur, the sprawling wisteria for the birth of Clara, then Daniel, the resilient lavender, a reminder of quiet strength through the chaos of raising two active children. Her life had always revolved around family. First her parents, then Arthur, then her children, and now, even in their adulthood, the unspoken expectation that she would continue to orbit their needs. Where was she in all of this? Beatrice Holloway. Not a mother, not a grandmother, not a widow, just a woman with her own dreams and desires, long buried under layers of self-sacrifice. She walked to the old chest of drawers in her bedroom, a piece Arthur had meticulously restored for her. From it, she pulled out a small, ornate wooden box. Inside, nestled among yellowed photographs and tiny clumsy crafts her children had made in kindergarten, lay a worn, leather-bound sketchbook. It wasn't a journal, but a collection of detailed watercolor sketches from a trip she'd taken when she was just 22. It was the summer after she'd graduated university. Before she met Arthur, before life had narrowed its paths into predictable, responsible choices. She had spent 2 exhilarating months backpacking through the Scottish Highlands, sketching ancient castles, wind-swept lochs, and the rugged, breathtaking landscapes. At that time, she'd been a quiet, reserved young woman from Willow Creek, but Scotland had awakened something wild and adventurous in her. She remembered meeting a lively, free-spirited art student named Fiona MacLeod in a small hostel in Fort William. Fiona, with her bright red hair and infectious laugh, had dared Beatrice to try a haggis, to climb a Munro, to paint in the rain. They had become fast friends, bonding over shared cups of strong tea and mutual disdain for overly touristy spots. They had even talked about opening a small art gallery together someday, a dream that had faded into the background when Beatrice returned home, met Arthur, and began her life as a wife and mother. After that summer, they had corresponded for years. Fiona would send postcards from various corners of the world, a bustling market in Marrakesh, a serene temple in Kyoto, a vibrant street in New Orleans. Beatrice, in turn, would share stories of her marriage, the births of her children, her teaching career before she became a librarian. Gradually, the letters became shorter and less frequent, eventually replaced by occasional Christmas cards. The last one had arrived about 5 years ago, shortly after Arthur's death. Fiona wrote that she'd finally settled down not in a grand gallery, but in a small, quirky bed and breakfast in the Outer Hebrides, right by the sea. She was still painting, still traveling, still living life on her own terms. Beatrice ran her fingers over the faded ink of Fiona's last address. What if she visited her? Not just visited, but stayed for a while. Away from Clara's demands, away from Daniel's entitled pronouncements, away from the suffocating feeling that her life didn't belong to her anymore. The thought seemed so audacious, so utterly out of character for the sensible, dependable Beatrice Holloway, that she almost laughed aloud. A 68-year-old widow, leaving everything and going to the remote Outer Hebrides? It sounded like the plot of some whimsical, improbable novel. But the more she thought about it, the more real the idea became. She had savings. The very savings that Daniel had so insistently claimed. She had her health, despite the occasional ache in her knees and the slight rise in her blood pressure. And she had a passport, which she'd renewed 2 years ago for a planned trip to visit a cousin in Cornwall, a trip she'd never taken because Clara had suddenly declared an urgent need for her to help organize a charity bake sale. A strange feeling washed over Beatrice, a potent mixture of excitement and fear. She, Beatrice Holloway, had always been the one who followed the rules, who put the needs of others before her own. But now, looking at the worn sketchbook, a realization dawned on her. She was ready to change that. She spent the rest of the morning at her old desktop computer, a clunky machine Daniel had given her. So you can see pictures of Leo on social media, Mom. Instead, Beatrice searched for information about ferry schedules to the Outer Hebrides, the cost of living in remote Scottish islands, and the potential for long-term rentals. By noon, she had a rough plan. First, she needed to contact Fiona. She found her last postcard and, with a deep breath, typed out an email. She tried to be brief but honest, telling Fiona about her situation, about how she felt used by her own children, about their audacious demand for her savings. Finally, she asked, timidly, if she might be able to stay with Fiona for a while, just until she found her own footing. When she sent the email, Beatrice felt strangely relieved, as if she had taken the first, irreversible step toward freedom. Now she had to wait for a reply and prepare for a possible departure. Lila. That same afternoon, Clara called. Her voice sounded strained. Mom, could you pick up a few things from the bridal boutique for me tomorrow? They're ready now and I'm just swamped. The maid of honor had a fitting issue, and I'm practically living there. Beatrice was going to say no. She wanted to say that she had her own plans, that she didn't have to always accommodate Clara's schedule, her every whim, but instead, she heard her own voice say, "Sure, honey. What time?" "Oh, you're the best, Mom," Clara exclaimed, a wave of relief audible in her voice. "Around 10, then? And by the way, have you thought about what Daniel was saying? About the money for the wedding?" That was it, the real reason for the call. "I'm still thinking, Clara," Beatrice replied, keeping her tone even. "But Mother, there's nothing to think about. It's for my wedding. Don't you want me to have the wedding of my dreams?" "What about my dreams, Clara?" Beatrice couldn't help but interject, a hint of steel entering her voice. "My dreams of a peaceful retirement? Of financial security?" There was a noticeable pause. "That's different, Mother," Clara said at last, her voice edged with impatience. "You've had your life. This is my turn. And that money is still sitting around. You're not going to spend it, are you?" Beatrice could feel the familiar anger building up inside her. Her children truly believed that at her age, she had no right to her own aspirations, no right to her own money. They had simply decided that her purpose was to facilitate their lives. "I'll think about it, Clara," Beatrice repeated, her voice colder this time. And then, without another word, she hung up, a newfound resolve hardening within her. After talking to Clara, Beatrice felt her determination to leave only strengthened. She had to act fast, before her children suspected something was amiss. They would find out eventually, of course, but she needed to be far away, truly independent when that moment arrived. The next morning, Beatrice prepared for her most audacious move yet. Her goal was simple, to withdraw all the money from her account. Not a traceable wire transfer, but cash. It was a substantial sum, almost £150,000, left over from the sale of her and Arthur's house after she had paid for the new, smaller cottage and all the associated taxes. It was her entire life savings, her lifeline. At the Willow Creek Savings Bank, Beatrice was met by a young teller with a polite, but somewhat distracted, smile. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Holloway?" she asked, her fingers already hovering over the keyboard. "I would like to withdraw money from my account, please," Beatrice stated, trying to keep her voice steady, confident. "Certainly. And how much would you like to withdraw?" "All of it," Beatrice replied. The teller's smile faded a little, her brow furrowing slightly. "The whole account, Mrs. Holloway?" Her voice was colored with surprise, a hint of apprehension. "That's quite a large sum of money. May I ask what you need the money for?" Beatrice had been prepared for this question. She had rehearsed her answer repeatedly in her mind. "I plan to invest it," she said, meeting the teller's gaze directly. "My financial advisor has recommended a better opportunity at another institution, with more favorable terms." It was a lie. Of course, but it sounded plausible enough. A standard response for someone handling significant wealth. The teller nodded slowly, though the doubt in her eyes was still evident. "I see. Well, it will take us some time to withdraw such a large sum of money. We don't keep that much cash on hand, as you can imagine. Can you wait, say, about 30 minutes while we arrange for it to be brought up from the vault?" "Of course," Beatrice nodded, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. She sat down in a plush armchair in the waiting area, trying to appear nonchalant, flipping through an outdated magazine. She had never lied so blatantly before, never done anything so daring, but in a strange, exhilarating way, it gave her strength. For the first time in years, she felt alive, active, not just a passive object buffeted by the whims of others. This wasn't just about escaping, it was about reclaiming her agency. 40 minutes later, she was ushered into a separate, more private office. The branch manager, a middle-aged man with a neat tie and an attentive, professional gaze, was waiting. He gestured for her to sit. "Mrs. Holloway," he began, his voice calm and measured, "I'd like to make sure you're fully aware of what you're doing. Withdrawing such a large amount of cash carries significant risks. There's the risk of theft, of misplacement, even of damage. A bank transfer would be much safer and instantly traceable." "I am aware of those risks, Mr. Peterson," Beatrice replied, her voice firm, unwavering. She met his gaze squarely, conveying an air of quiet determination. "I prefer cash." The manager paused, his eyes studying her for a long moment, as if trying to gauge her sincerity, her mental state. Beatrice didn't flinch. She simply held his gaze, her expression unreadable. Finally, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. "All right, Mrs. Holloway, we'll get the money ready for you. But I must strongly advise you to secure it in a safe place immediately. It's a very large sum." "I've taken care of that," Beatrice lied again, a flicker of satisfaction passing through her. She had a plan, yes, but not one she would share with a cautious bank manager. An hour later, she emerged from the bank, a heavy, nondescript canvas bag clutched tightly in her hands. The weight of it was strangely exhilarating, the tangible result of a lifetime of work, of prudent savings, now hers, truly hers, to command. It felt surreal to be carrying the sum total of her financial security, her past, her future, in a simple fabric bag. Her first stop was the post office. She bypassed the regular queues and went directly to the counter for safe deposit boxes. It wasn't the most high-tech security, but it was infinitely safer than keeping that much money at home. She rented the largest box available, meticulously counted out the bulk of the money, and secured it inside, retaining only a small, manageable amount for immediate expenses. Leaving the post office, Beatrice hurried towards the bus stop that would take her to the bridal boutique. On the way, she checked her email on her old phone. Still no reply from Fiona. A pang of anxiety tightened her chest. What if Fiona didn't answer? Or what if she said no? Then Beatrice would have to look for other options. But the decision to leave to embrace this new, independent life was ripe within her, a burning ember of resolve. At the bridal boutique, Clara's assistant, a young woman with a perfectly coiffed bun and an air of harried efficiency, handed Beatrice a stack of garment bags and a box of delicate lace samples. "Clara said to tell you, thank you, Mrs. Holloway," she chirped, without even looking up from her tablet. "She's just so busy with everything." "I'm sure she is," Beatrice replied, forcing a smile. She carried the heavy bags out to the bus stop, her mind buzzing with the conflicting emotions of her morning. She had secured her money, taken a monumental step, yet here she was, still running errands, still a dutiful invisible helper in her daughter's grand production. Later that afternoon, after carefully delivering the bridal items to Clara's apartment, Clara herself was, predictably, out at a crucial meeting, and putting the kettle on for her usual evening tea, Beatrice finally got a response from Fiona. The email was in her typical exuberant style, a vibrant mix of Scottish lilt translated into text. "Ma chérie Beatrice, what a surprise! A letter from you after all these years. Ugh, of course you can come and visit. My wee house here in the Hebrides is your home for as long as you need it. I've got a guest bedroom overlooking the sea. You'll wake up to the sound of the waves. A true balm for the soul, lass. Oh, Winnie." I still call you Winnie, my dear. It suited you so much better than that proper Beatrice. It's been years, but I've always remembered you, your quiet strength, your kindness, and perhaps a wee bit too much restraint if you ask me. Judging by your letter, those kids of yours don't appreciate you at all. It's high time you showed them that their mother is not just an ATM and a babysitter. Come soon. We'll drink whiskey on the terrace and watch the sunset, just like old times, remember? Bon voyage, my dear friend. Beatrice read the letter several times, her eyes filling with tears. Fiona hadn't changed. Still the same emotional, straightforward, incredibly supportive person she remembered. And she was waiting for her. Beatrice had a place to go, a real, tangible escape. The feeling of being truly seen, truly welcomed, was a powerful antidote to the years of feeling taken for granted. The next 2 weeks passed in a feverish blur of preparations, a secret life running parallel to her outwardly mundane existence. Beatrice booked her plane ticket, a complicated multi-leg journey that involved a flight to Glasgow, then a smaller plane to a remote island airport, and finally, a ferry to Fiona's Island. She ordered a new, sturdy suitcase online. Her old one, a relic from family holidays, would surely fall apart on such a demanding journey. She packed the most necessary things: documents, a few cherished photographs, her sketchbook, and a small pouch containing the remaining cash from her bank withdrawal, now carefully tucked into a money belt. Throughout it all, Beatrice did her best to act normal. She continued her weekly grocery shopping, picked up Daniel's dry cleaning when he called with an urgent request, and even spent an afternoon helping Clara address wedding invitations, her fingers aching from the elaborate calligraphy her daughter insisted upon. "Mother, are you still thinking?" Daniel asked impatiently during one of his rare brief calls. "The wedding is just 3 months away. We need to get the final catering numbers, and Clara is getting stressed about the budget. We need to finalize your contribution." "I've almost made up my mind," Beatrice replied, her voice calm, almost serene. It was the truth, after all. The decision had been made, just not the one he expected. A week before her planned departure, the thing Beatrice feared most happened. Daniel arrived unannounced, a thick folder of documents clutched in his hand. He didn't even knock, simply walked in, using the spare key he still possessed. "Mom, I've brought the papers for the wedding fund," he announced, striding into the living room. "All you have to do is sign them, and we can transfer the money to Clara's account right away. This will really put her mind at ease." Beatrice felt her heart pound, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. She was cornered. "Daniel," she began, her voice a little shaky, "I haven't decided yet." "What's there to decide, Mother?" he interrupted, his voice rising, edged with barely concealed frustration. "It's for your daughter's wedding. You're not going to spend that money at your age, are you?" "At my age?" Beatrice asked him again, and something in her voice, a sudden chill, seemed to silence him. "What about my age, Daniel?" he faltered, visibly uncomfortable. "Well, you're not young anymore, Mother. You don't need that kind of money. Clara needs it for her future, for this wedding that sets her up for life." He gestured vaguely, encompassing grand aspirations and lavish expenses. Beatrice looked at her son, a tall, confident man who resembled Arthur in his strong build but was so utterly different in character. Arthur had never been so possessive, so demanding. He respected other people's boundaries, other people's decisions. He would never have dared to claim her hard-earned savings, as if they were his by right. "I'll think about it some more," Beatrice said firmly, pushing down the anger that threatened to boil over. "Now, if you don't mind, I have a doctor's appointment scheduled very soon." It was a lie, a flimsy excuse, but Daniel, caught off guard by her uncharacteristic assertiveness, didn't insist. He left the folder on the coffee table and departed, muttering something about senile stubbornness under his breath. After he left, Beatrice sat down at the table and stared at the folder for a long time. Inside was a plan to deprive her of her savings, all that was left of her life with Arthur, all under the pretense of caring for Clara's future, for her dream wedding. That evening, Clara called. "Mother, Daniel says you still have doubts," she began without preamble, her voice sharp with annoyance. "Why are you being so stubborn? It's for my wedding. Don't you want me to be happy?" "What about my happiness, Clara?" Beatrice asked again, her voice steady. "Don't I deserve that too?" There was a pregnant pause. "Mom, we've talked about this," Clara said, her tone laced with exasperation. "This is different. Daniel and I have a specific plan. You just don't seem to understand the scale of what we're trying to achieve here." "Don't you have plans for your own life, Clara?" Beatrice countered, pushing back. "Beyond a lavish wedding funded by your mother's retirement?" "Mom, you know my situation," Clara exclaimed, a touch of genuine hurt in her voice. Or perhaps it was just well-practiced indignation. "I'm trying to start my life, build a career, and planning a wedding that sets me up properly. It's expensive. I can't just pull that kind of money out of thin air." Beatrice sighed. It was always the same. Always the same excuses. Clara had a decent job, a good fiancé. Other young couples managed to get married without financially crippling their elderly parents. "Clara," Beatrice interrupted her, "I haven't made a decision yet. Give me time." "But Mom, the time." "Give me time." "Clara," Beatrice repeated firmly, cutting her off. After talking to her daughter, Beatrice checked her escape plan again. The plane ticket was bought for the following Tuesday. Fiona had confirmed that the room was ready for her. She had already packed most of the things she planned to take with her, and had stashed her new suitcase in the back of her closet, hidden beneath old blankets. The hardest part was writing her farewell letter. She sat over the blank sheet of paper for a long time, not knowing how to explain what she'd done. She didn't want to accuse, she didn't want to hurt, but it didn't make sense to hide the truth either. Eventually, the words began to flow, short and to the point. Dear Clara and Daniel, by the time you read this, I will be far away. I have decided to take a break from our intertwined lives and live for myself. Don't worry about me. I am safe and in good company. As for the money you were so concerned about, my savings, it is with me. I have decided to spend it on myself, on my new life. It may seem selfish, but after all the years I've spent taking care of others, I believe I've earned the right to be selfish. Please do not try to find me. When I am ready, I will contact you myself. Love, your mother. Love. After rereading the letter, Beatrice folded it neatly and tucked it away in her desk drawer. A few more days, and a new chapter of her life would begin. The life of Beatrice Holloway. Not a belly. Mother. Not a grandmother. Not a widow. Just a woman who had finally decided to live for herself. Koilogi. Tuesday morning was surprisingly sunny for Willow Creek. The golden rays streamed through the thin curtains of Beatrice's bedroom, as if to encourage her. Today is the day, Beatrice. Don't back down. She woke early, long before her alarm clock rang, sleep having fled instantly, replaced by a potent cocktail of excitement and fear. Today, she would do the most audacious thing she had ever done in her life. Today, she would disappear. Her flight was scheduled for 2:30 p.m., but Beatrice planned to leave the house by 9 a.m. She needed to retrieve the bulk of her money from the safe deposit box, and then take a cab directly to the airport. Everything was ready. Her new suitcase packed with carefully selected essentials, her documents checked several times over, her boarding passes printed and tucked securely into her travel wallet. She got up, took a shower, and made herself a cup of strong tea. Her movements were almost mechanical, as if it wasn't she who was controlling her body, but some pre-programmed sequence. It was a strange, disembodied sensation, realizing that in just a few hours she would be leaving this house, this town, this familiar life she had known for decades. At 8 a.m., she took out the letter she had written to her children and placed it prominently on the dining room table, right where they would see it. Once more, she reread the words, her own resolve mirrored in the stark honesty of the prose. Dear Clara and Daniel, by the time you read this, I will be far away. I have decided to take a break from our intertwined lives and live for myself. Don't worry about me. I am safe and in good company. As for the money you were so concerned about, my savings, it is with me. I have decided to spend it on myself, on my new life. It may seem selfish, but after all the years I've spent taking care of others, I believe I've earned the right to be selfish. Please do not try to find me. When I am ready, I will contact you myself. Love, your mother. Each word resonated with a quiet pain, but also with an unwavering determination. She knew she would cause her children anxiety, perhaps even real hurt. But had they thought about her feelings when they planned to demand the last thing she had left of her past life, her hard-earned security? Had they considered her long-suppressed dreams? At 8:30 a.m., the phone rang. It was Clara. Mom, can you please pick up my dress from the alterations place today? They called, it's ready, and my schedule is absolutely packed with last-minute vendor meetings. Daniel is out of town, and I just don't have a minute. Beatrice closed her eyes. This was it, the final test of her resolve, the ultimate moment to break free. I'm sorry, Clara, she said, surprised at the firmness in her own voice. I can't make it tonight. What do you mean, you can't? There was a hint of irritation, then disbelief in Clara's voice. Do you have plans? Yes, Beatrice answered simply. I have plans. What plans? Now Clara wasn't even trying to hide her exasperation, her disbelief. Mom, this is my wedding dress. It's important. Can't you just help me for a moment? It's the biggest day of my life. For a fleeting second, Beatrice almost gave in. Years of pleasing, of instinctively putting her children's needs before her own, were taking their toll. But then she remembered Daniel's entitled demand for her money, his words about her age, Clara's casual disregard for her time and her life. "I'm sorry, Clara, but no. You'll have to find another option." "Mom," Clara exclaimed, a sharp, disbelieving cry. "What is happening to you? You've never acted like this before." "I'm just finally getting on with my life," Beatrice said, and with a final, decisive click, she hung up the phone. Her hands were shaking, but her resolve only grew stronger. She turned her phone off, knowing that Clara would call back, probably even ask Daniel to call her. Let them think the phone was dead. Let them wonder. At 9 a.m., precisely on schedule, Beatrice left the house, her new suitcase rolling smoothly behind her. Her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Flanders, was out watering the flowers in her garden and looked up in surprise. "Are you going away, Beatrice?" she asked, her voice laced with friendly curiosity. "Ah, yes," Beatrice answered with a small, genuine smile. "A little trip. Time to stretch the old bones, as they say." "You're right." Mrs. Flanders nodded approvingly, a knowing look in her eyes. "It's about time. All those children and grandchildren, you should think about yourself too." If only she knew how right she was, Beatrice thought. The cab she'd ordered in advance was waiting at the curb, its engine idling softly. The driver, a young man with an earpiece plugged into his ear, quickly helped her with her suitcase. "To the post office on High Street, please," Beatrice said, settling into the back seat. All the way to the post office, she stared out the window at the familiar streets of Willow Creek, the city where most of her life had been spent. The city she was now leaving, possibly forever. At the post office, she retrieved the large stack of bills from the safe deposit box. Large denominations, neatly stacked in a special waterproof pouch she'd bought from an online store for travelers. Not the most original solution, but far safer than carrying everything in her bag. "Now, to the airport, please," she said to the driver as she got back into the cab, the heavy pouch secured around her waist beneath her clothes. The airport was a symphony of noise and movement. She checked in her suitcase, passed through security, and found herself in the waiting area, a strange sense of unreality washing over her. Beatrice Holloway, a 68-year-old widow and grandmother of two, sitting in Heathrow Airport, waiting for a flight to the Outer Hebrides, with her life savings strapped to her body and no return ticket. It was almost absurd. At 12 p.m., she turned on her phone to check her email. As expected, there were several missed calls from Clara, and even a couple from Daniel. She didn't bother listening to the voicemails. They were sure to be full of recriminations and demands. Instead, she sent Fiona a short message, confirming her imminent arrival. Fiona replied almost instantly. "Looking forward to it, my dear? Bought a bottle of your favorite single malt. Remember that peaty one we loved? Bon voyage, ma chérie." Beatrice smiled. Fiona remembered that she loved peaty whiskey. Even after all these years, she had always been attentive to details, to the nuances of friendship. Her flight was announced on time. She boarded the plane, found her window seat, and settled in. A young couple sat next to her, clearly newlyweds, judging by their matching rings and their giddy, amorous looks. "Do you often fly to Scotland?" the girl asked, noticing that Beatrice didn't look quite as excited as they did. "For the first time in many years," Beatrice answered, her gaze already drifting out the window. "But I spent a wonderful summer there, a very long time ago." "Oh, how romantic!" the girl exclaimed. "Bringing back memories?" "You could say that," Beatrice smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "But more to create new ones." The couple exchanged glances, clearly thinking she was a nice, eccentric old lady. Let them think what they want, Beatrice thought. My life is no longer defined by other people's expectations. The flight was uneventful. She even managed to drift off to sleep, lulled by the monotonous hum of the engines. When the plane began its descent, and the rugged green and brown patchwork of the Scottish Highlands appeared in the window, Beatrice felt a strange sense of homecoming. Though she had only spent one summer there, almost 50 years ago, something about the country had always resonated with her soul. The vastness, the wild beauty, the quiet strength of the landscape, it called to a part of her that had long been dormant. At Glasgow Airport, she turned her phone back on. More missed calls. Now both children were calling alternately, almost nonstop. They must have found her letter by now. Beatrice imagined their panic, their bewilderment, perhaps even anger. Daniel must be the angriest of them all. His plan to get her money for Clara's wedding had completely fallen through. She texted Fiona that she had landed and would be taking the connecting flight soon. Fiona replied that she would meet her at the tiny island airport. The journey from Glasgow to the Outer Hebrides was a blur of seamless connections. The small propeller plane felt like a toy, bouncing gently through pockets of air, offering breathtaking views of the islands below, like scattered emeralds on a sapphire sea. Then came the short ferry ride, the salty tang of the air a bracing slap against her cheeks. Everything around her seemed both foreign and strangely familiar. The lilting accents, the stark beauty of the treeless landscapes, the sheep wandering freely on the roads. As the ferry pulled into the small, windswept harbor of Fiona's Island, Beatrice spotted her. Fiona stood on the pier, her hand shielding her eyes from the setting sun, looking for her among the disembarking passengers. Beatrice recognized her at once, despite the years. She hadn't changed much. The same slender figure, the vibrant red hair, now a striking silver streaked with faint remnants of its former glory, and a brightly colored hand-knitted shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "Winnie!" Fiona exclaimed when she saw Beatrice, rushing towards her with open arms. They embraced, and Beatrice inhaled the familiar scent of Fiona's perfume, something earthy and wild, like heather and sea salt. "You haven't changed at all," Fiona said, pulling away and looking at her with wide, assessing eyes. "Still the same elegant English woman, a bit paler perhaps, but the fire is still there. And you're still a liar." Beatrice laughed, a genuine, bubbling laugh that felt foreign on her own lips. "I've grown old, and we both know it." "Nonsense," Fiona scoffed, linking her arm through Beatrice's. "We've matured, like fine whiskey. Come on, my wee car is in the car park." Fiona drove like she did everything else in her life. Fast, with infectious enthusiasm, and a total disregard for speed limits on the winding single-track roads. The little bright blue car zipped through the narrow lanes, climbing higher and higher into the hills above the harbor. "My house is at the top," Fiona explained, her voice ringing with pride. "The view is divine, worth every penny I paid for it, even if it did mean eating beans on toast for a year." Fiona's house turned out to be a charming, stone-built cottage, nestled into the hillside, with a vibrant red door and a small, sheltered terrace overlooking the vast expanse of the Atlantic. Around it was a wild, untamed garden bursting with hardy island flowers. "Welcome to my little paradise," Fiona said, helping Beatrice with her suitcase. "I hope you like it here." Inside, the house was as bright and eclectic as its hostess, walls covered in Fiona's own vivid, abstract paintings, colorful, mismatched cushions on the couches, shelves overflowing with books, quirky figurines, and souvenirs from different countries. "Your room is here." Fiona opened a door to a small but bright bedroom, with a window seat bathed in soft light. "Just as I promised, a view of the sea." Beatrice walked to the window and gasped, freezing in admiration. Below, the sea stretched out endlessly, a vast canvas of shifting grays and deep blues, sparkling under the late afternoon sun. In the distance, she could just make out the dark outlines of small fishing boats. "It's beautiful," Beatrice breathed out, the words barely a whisper. "And this is your home now," Fiona smiled, her eyes twinkling. "For as long as you like." They settled on the terrace, wrapped in thick wool blankets, with glasses of the peaty single malt whiskey Fiona had, as promised, bought especially for Beatrice's arrival. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky and the sea in shades of fiery orange and deep violet. "So," Fiona raised her glass, "to your freedom, ma chérie." "To freedom," Beatrice echoed, clinking her glass against Fiona's, the clink sounding like a tiny chime of victory. "Now, tell me everything," Fiona demanded, leaning forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. "You were so reserved in your letter, so typically English. I want to know every detail." And so Beatrice did. She told her about Clara and Daniel, who saw her only as a convenient house-sitter and a source of money. About Daniel's audacious demand that she give up her savings for Clara's extravagant wedding. Her decision to leave, to finally start a new life for herself. "Bravo!" Fiona exclaimed when Beatrice had finished, clapping her hands together. "You finally acted like a real woman instead of a dutiful mother and grandmother." "I always said you had fire in you, Winnie. It was just hidden too deep." They talked late into the night, reminiscing about their shared past, discussing their very different presents, and making tentative plans for Beatrice's future. When Beatrice finally went to bed, the fatigue of the journey and the warmth of the whiskey had done their work, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, the sound of the waves, a gentle lullaby outside her window. The morning in the Outer Hebrides dawned crisp and clear. Beatrice was awakened not by an alarm, but by the distant cry of seagulls and the rhythmic sigh of the sea against the shore. For a moment she was disoriented, not quite realizing where she was. Then, it all came flooding back. Her escape, Fiona, the wild, beautiful island. She lay in bed, watching the sunlight play on the rough-hewn stone walls of the cottage, and felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, she woke up without a thought of what she needed to do for others, what demand awaited her. Today, she could do whatever she wanted. "Kanimi kaman no shamas." Fiona was already in the kitchen, a cheerful clatter of pans indicating she was preparing breakfast. The smell of strong coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air. "Bonjour, sleeping beauty," Fiona exclaimed, turning from the stove when she saw Beatrice. "How did you sleep in your new place?" "Surprisingly well," Beatrice admitted, a lightness in her step as she joined Fiona. After a hearty breakfast of fresh local eggs and thick, crusty bread, Fiona offered to show her around the island. They spent the day wandering through tiny villages, their houses huddled together against the wind, their harbors dotted with fishing boats. They visited ancient standing stones, remnants of a forgotten past, and walked along deserted beaches, the sand white as sugar, the water a startling turquoise. "Everything is slower here," Fiona explained, her voice carrying easily on the wind. "People are not in a hurry. They are enjoying life, not rushing through it." Beatrice suddenly realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about time, about having to hurry, or meet someone, or take care of someone. She was just here, and now, and that feeling seemed like an almost forgotten luxury, a freedom she hadn't known she craved so desperately. By late afternoon, they returned to Fiona's cottage, invigorated by the sea air and the sheer beauty of the landscape. Beatrice finally decided it was time to turn on her phone. As soon as it booted up, a torrent of notifications flooded the screen. 37 missed calls, 23 from Daniel, 14 from Clara, and a multitude of messages, ranging wildly in tone from outright panic to seething anger. "Mom, where are you? Call me now!" Clara repeated numerous times. "This isn't funny, Mom. We're all worried. Clara is crying again." Daniel trying for sympathy. "Mom, what the hell is going on? Where did you disappear to? And what do you mean the money is with you? Call me back immediately." Daniel, pure fury. The last message, sent just an hour ago, read, "Mom, we've gone to the police. If you're reading this, please let me know you're okay. We're going crazy with worry." Beatrice showed the messages to Fiona. "They're worried," she said, a faint note of guilt in her voice. "They're worried about the money," Fiona corrected, her gaze sharp. "Especially your son, by the looks of it. Perhaps they're worried about the wedding budget falling apart." "Perhaps I should answer," Beatrice mused, her finger hovering over the screen. "Just say I'm fine." "That's your decision, ma chérie," Fiona said, her voice softening slightly. "But remember why you're here. If you make contact right away, the whole effect will be lost. They'll just go back to taking you for granted. This is about them understanding, not just you escaping." Beatrice knew Fiona was right. The purpose of her disappearance was not only to start a new life, but also to make her children realize that she wasn't just a handy resource that was always at hand, always available. "You're right," Beatrice said, turning off her phone again. "Let them worry a little longer." Over the next few days, Beatrice slowly adjusted to her new life. Fiona showed her her art studio, a bright, airy room at the back of the cottage, with huge windows overlooking the sea. There, Fiona held classes for local children and occasional tourists. "You could join me, Fiona," suggested, sketching a vibrant landscape with effortless strokes. "Help with the lessons. After all, you're an ex-teacher." "But I taught English, Fiona, not art," Beatrice objected, laughing. Fiona snorted. "What's the difference? The main thing is to be able to engage, to interest. And they don't teach you that in books. You either have it or you don't. You have it, Winnie. I saw it in your sketches from all those years ago." And so Beatrice began helping Fiona in the studio. At first, she was just assisting, preparing materials, tidying up. Then, she started to conduct parts of the classes, mostly with the small groups of English-speaking tourists who braved the remote location, or with local children who were learning English in school. She found a deep satisfaction in it. They spent evenings on the terrace, watching sunsets that bled across the sky in impossible shades of orange and purple, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes, they would simply sit in comfortable silence, listening to the vast, calming sound of the sea. In these moments, Beatrice felt a peace and freedom that she had not experienced for many, many years. And what about her children? They kept calling, but less and less often. The tone of the messages changed, slowly, subtly. From panic to anger, then to bewilderment, and finally to a kind of resigned confusion. "The police say you flew to Scotland voluntarily, Mom," Daniel wrote in one message. "I don't understand what's going on. Why are you doing this? The wedding plans are a mess." "Found your picture at the airport," Clara reported, her message devoid of exclamation marks now. "Did you actually fly away without saying a word? How could you?" Beatrice read these messages with mixed feelings, a twinge of guilt, but also a growing sense of satisfaction. They were finally noticing that she existed separate from their needs, that she had her own life, her own desires. The Halffootball. On her 10th day in the Outer Hebrides, Fiona returned from the nearest village, a 20-minute drive away, with the local newspaper and a strange look on her face. "What happened?" Beatrice asked, sensing a shift in Fiona's usually cheerful demeanor. "Your son," Fiona said, holding out the paper to Beatrice. "He's here." Beatrice stared at her in bewilderment, then shifted her gaze to the newspaper. On one of the inside pages, amidst local announcements, was a small advertisement in English. "Wanted. Beatrice Holloway, 68 years old, believed to be in the Outer Hebrides area. Any information, please phone. Daniel's number." "He won't give up," Beatrice muttered, a cold dread washing over her. "He's looking for the money," Fiona corrected, her voice blunt. "Not necessarily you, or rather, he's looking for you because you have the money." Beatrice knew she was right. Daniel was persistent, not primarily because he was worried about her well-being, but because of the £150,000 she had taken with her. The money, he felt, was rightfully Clara's wedding fund. That evening, Fiona returned from the village again, this time with more news. "There's an Englishman in town," she said, her eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Showing your picture around, asking if anyone has seen you. Says you're his mother, that you're sick and need help." "Daniel," Beatrice breathed out, her heart pounding in her chest. "He's here." "Don't worry," Fiona sat down next to her, taking Beatrice's trembling hand in hers. "No one will give you away. The islanders don't like outsiders prying into other people's business. Besides, you're not a criminal, Winnie. You're a grown woman who has the right to live wherever she wants." But Beatrice still felt uneasy. This was a small, close-knit community. Sooner or later, Daniel might come across someone who had seen her with Fiona, perhaps recognized her from a quick trip to the village shop. "Maybe I should talk to him," Beatrice suggested, the thought both terrifying and strangely compelling. "Explain everything." "If you're ready for that," Fiona nodded, her expression serious. "But remember why you're here. Don't let him manipulate you, make you feel guilty. This is about your freedom, not his convenience." Beatrice nodded, but her insides clenched at the thought of the confrontation ahead. She hadn't seen Daniel in only 10 days, but it felt like months had passed, like that life was in a different, distant reality. The next day, Fiona returned from the village with new information, her brow furrowed with concern. "Your son is staying at the Sea Breeze Hotel on the waterfront," she reported, her voice low. "He's been going around to all the local restaurants and shops, showing your picture to everyone he meets. He says you're his mother, that you're sick and need help." "Sick?" Beatrice was outraged, her voice sharp with indignation. "It's just manipulation." "Precisely," Fiona finished for her, a grim set to her lips. "He's trying to garner sympathy, to get people to unwittingly betray your whereabouts. He's telling everyone he's worried sick about his poor, ailing mother who has seemingly vanished." That evening, sitting on the terrace wrapped in a thick blanket, Beatrice could see the sparse lights of the village twinkling below, reflections dancing on the dark water of the bay. She thought of Daniel, who might be wandering those very same streets, the same windswept paths Fiona and she had explored that afternoon, tirelessly searching for her. Searching for her, yes, but primarily searching for the money. The phone rang again. Daniel. His name flashed accusingly on the screen. Beatrice almost decided to answer it. A powerful, almost magnetic urge to confront him, to set the record straight. But at the very last moment, her finger hesitated, and she dropped the call. Immediately, a message came through. "Mom, I know you're in the Hebrides. Please, let's talk. I'm worried about you." Worried? Of course he was. But was it true worry, or the anxiety of a financial plan gone awry? If he was truly worried, he wouldn't have demanded that she give up all her savings for his sister's wedding. If he worried, he would have noticed how tired she was, how weary her spirit had become from years of self-effacing service, instead of simply taking her presence and help for granted. But a part of Beatrice, the part of her that had always been a mother first and foremost, the part that still held a deep, unconditional love for her children, responded to that phrase. Maybe he's really worried. Maybe her disappearance, her abrupt silence, had finally made him reconsider how he truly felt about her, beyond her utility. That night, Beatrice couldn't sleep for a long time, listening to the vast, comforting roar of the sea outside her window, and thinking about her son, who was now somewhere very close to her, on the same small island, tirelessly looking for her. And money, of course. Above all, money. Hesse. The morning light, a soft, ethereal glow, began to filter through the blinds, painting the room in gentle golden tones. Beatrice woke to the insistent sound of her phone. Another call from Daniel. The third this morning, and it was only 8 a.m. Yesterday, he'd called 28 times. The day before that, 32. Her son's persistence, fueled by frustration and perhaps genuine concern, knew no bounds. She didn't answer. She continued to only turn her phone on once a day, to check messages, and then turned it off again. Fiona thought she should change her number altogether, suggesting it with a conspiratorial wink. But Beatrice wasn't ready to sever all contact, all ties to her past life. Not yet. "He won't give up," Fiona said, coming into the room with a steaming cup of coffee. "I saw him outside the village shop yesterday, showing your picture to the postman." He was quite animated. "And what did the postman say?" Beatrice asked, a small knowing smile playing on her lips. "That he'd never seen you before, of course." Fiona grinned, her eyes sparkling. "Hamish is an old friend of mine. He wouldn't give you away to anyone, not even if Daniel showed up with a full film crew. That's the advantage of a small island community. Everyone knows everyone, and a stranger asking too many questions, especially about personal affairs, only causes distrust and silence. He's been here 2 weeks now, Beatrice sighed, looking out at the endless expanse of the sea. He'll have to go back to England someday. He has a job, a family. Aye, but while he's here, we'd better be careful, Fiona said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. No strolls along the harbor, no visits to the village pub. Good thing my studio's on the outskirts. Beatrice nodded. For almost a month now she had been living in this little Hebridean haven, and every day was a discovery. At first, Fiona and Beatrice had simply explored the island, visiting local markets, ancient ruins, and tiny, windswept museums that felt more like someone's living room. Then, Beatrice had started helping Fiona at the art studio, first with administrative tasks, organizing supplies, handling inquiries from English-speaking tourists, and then she found herself drawn into the classes for English-speaking children. She loved working with the children again, but this time it was different. Not as a grandmother who had to take care of her grandchildren, feeling obligated and exhausted, but as a mentor, a guide, helping them discover their own creative potential. The children came to the studio with burning eyes, full of unbridled enthusiasm and boundless curiosity. They didn't take her help for granted. They thanked her, asked questions, eagerly shared their thoughts, their wobbly drawings, and their vibrant, imaginative ideas. "You're blossoming, Winnie," Fiona remarked one day, watching Beatrice patiently help a little girl mix paints to create the perfect shade of turquoise for a stormy sea. "When you first got here, you had that look in your eyes, so tired, so world-weary. Now they shine. You have a twinkle again." Beatrice could feel the change herself. It was as if a heavy, invisible weight had been lifted from her shoulders, a weight of constant responsibility, of being always available, always ready to put aside her own plans for the needs of her children and grandchildren. Here, on this remote island, she could just be herself. Beatrice. Not a mother, not a grandmother, not a widow, just a woman with her own interests and desires. She even began to draw herself, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence. Her sketches were inept, amateurish, but filled with a pleasure and a freedom she hadn't experienced since her own high school art classes. Fiona patiently explained the basics of composition, color theory, and different techniques. "You have a natural sense of color, Winnie," she said, looking at Beatrice's first watercolor sketches. "You just have to learn to trust your intuition, to let your own unique vision come through." Beyond painting, Beatrice discovered the joy of simple, unhurried things. Long walks on the beach at dawn, when no one else was around but the gulls and the crashing waves. Reading books in a hammock strung between two gnarled, wind-beaten trees. Cooking simple, comforting local dishes from recipes shared by Fiona's friendly neighbors. The only thing that marred this idyllic existence was Daniel's constant calls and the lingering, quiet thoughts of Clara and her grandchildren. Especially the grandchildren. The phone rang again. This time it was Clara. She called less often than Daniel, usually once or twice a day, and the messages from her were different now. Less demanding, more confused, sometimes even tinged with desperation. "Mom, I don't understand why you left so suddenly. The wedding plans are a nightmare. And the children. Leo keeps asking when Grandma will be back. Please call." Unlike Daniel, Clara seemed to genuinely miss Beatrice. Not just her help with the wedding, but her presence. Or maybe, Beatrice thought, she just wanted to believe that. "Clara's on the phone," she said to Fiona, holding up the glowing screen. "Will you answer it?" Beatrice shook her head. It wasn't time yet. Not quite. After breakfast, they went to the studio. Today was a class for local children, a boisterous group of 6 boys and girls from 7 to 10 years old. Beatrice didn't speak Gaelic well enough to teach, but she was able to help with materials, demonstrate techniques, offer quiet encouragement. The day flew by in a blur of bright colors and joyful chatter. In the evening, on their way home, they passed by the village square, and there, sitting alone at a small outdoor table at the pub, was Daniel. He was looking at something on his phone, his face tired and frowning, etched with visible frustration. Beatrice instinctively retreated into the shadows of a nearby alley, pulling Fiona with her. Though Daniel was looking the other way and would hardly have noticed her, a primal instinct for self-preservation kicked in. "Your son looks exhausted," Fiona remarked softly, her eyes assessing. "He's stubborn," Beatrice said, her voice tight. "He's always been that way. Once he's got it in his head, he won't back down. I wonder what's driving him more, worrying about his mother, or wanting the money back for Clara's disastrous wedding plans." Beatrice didn't answer. It was a question that tormented her. She wanted to believe that Daniel sought her out of love, out of concern. But his persistence, his increasingly angry and demanding messages, told her otherwise. "Mother, I don't understand how you could do such a thing. That money was needed for Clara's wedding. Your daughter, how could you be so selfish?" Selfish. That word hurt the most. All her life, Beatrice had put her children's needs before her own. She had given up career opportunities, travel, her own interests, for them. And now that she had done something for herself, for the first time in decades, she was branded selfish. At home, Beatrice turned on her phone to check her messages. 15 missed calls from Daniel, 2 from Clara. And a new message from Clara, different from the others. "Mom, I talked to a therapist about our situation. She helped me realize something. It seems that Daniel and we've been taking you for granted for a long time. Forgive us, please. Please, just let me know you're okay. We're going crazy with worry." Beatrice reread the message several times, her heart clenching. Clara went to a therapist and admitted that they'd been treating her wrong? That was so unlike her practical, always sure-footed daughter. Had something truly broken through? "Did something happen?" Fiona asked, noticing Beatrice's pensive expression. Beatrice silently held out the phone. Fiona read the message, her eyes widening slightly. "Progress?" she nodded, a slow, thoughtful smile spreading across her face. "It looks like your daughter is beginning to understand. And Daniel?" "He's still angry," Beatrice sighed. "It's always harder for men to admit their mistakes," Fiona said philosophically, "especially when it comes to their mothers. But he'll understand too, in time." Time. Beatrice had plenty of time now. No schedules, no commitments, no need to adjust to other people's plans. Just endless, quiet time on the island. For herself. The next morning, stepping out onto the small balcony with a cup of freshly brewed tea, Beatrice saw an envelope in the mailbox by the gate. Strange, she thought. Usually the mail came later, delivered by the local postman on his rounds. "Fiona, are you expecting a letter?" she called out, coming down to the kitchen. "No, why?" Fiona replied, looking up from her painting. "There's an envelope in the box," Beatrice said. They walked to the gate together. The envelope was addressed simply to Beatrice Holloway, and written in Clara's familiar, elegant handwriting. How did she know the address? Beatrice wondered aloud. "Small island?" Fiona shrugged, a knowing twinkle in her eye. Someone could have told her. Or perhaps she was following her brother. News travels fast, even here. Beatrice carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter folded neatly and several photographs. Leo at the park laughing and covered in sand. Leo at the beach splashing in the waves with a delighted grin. Leo at a holiday table, his face smeared with cake. A pang, sharp and sudden, pierced Beatrice's chest. Her grandchild. She hadn't realized how much she missed him. Manin. "Dear Mom, I don't know if you will get this letter. I hope you will. I've been thinking a long time about what to say to you, how to explain my feelings. Daniel thinks I should just demand your return, talk about your responsibility to the family, to my wedding. But I don't agree with him anymore. Not after you left. After you left, I had to rethink a lot of things. The therapist helped me to see how Daniel and I treated you all those years. We took your help, your time, your love for granted. We truly thought you existed only for us. We never thought about your wishes, your dreams, about you as a person. And the wedding, it became this enormous pressure, this thing that consumed me. And I just assumed you would be there, providing whatever was needed, without question. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for all the times I dumped responsibilities on you without asking. For all the times I ignored your plans, thinking they were less important than mine, or than the wedding. For never saying thank you often enough. I know now that was wrong. So deeply wrong. Leo misses you terribly. I'm sending some pictures so you can see him growing up. He won the nursery's little Reading Star Award. And he learned to ride his tricycle without his training wheels. He often asks about you. I tell him that Grandma's traveling, discovering the world, that she deserves it. Because you do, Mom. You truly do. I'm not asking you to come back. Not like Daniel is. I just want to know that you're okay, that you're happy. That's all that matters. Please, just let me know you're safe. Love, Clara. Beatrice sank down onto the small wooden bench by the gate, the letter clutched in her hand, feeling tears prick at her eyes. It was exactly the confession she'd been subconsciously waiting for all these years. The recognition that she wasn't just a mother and grandmother, a never-ending source of support, but a human being with her own needs and desires, her own dreams. Is everything okay? Fiona asked softly, sitting down next to her, her arm slipping gently around Beatrice's shoulders. Beatrice silently held out the letter. Fiona read it, her expression thoughtful, then nodded slowly. It's a good letter, Winnie. A very good letter. Sincere. Your daughter has truly realized her mistakes. Yes, Beatrice agreed, looking at the pictures of Leo. He had grown so much in this month. Or did it just seem that way to her, now that she was seeing him with different eyes no longer clouded by resentment and duty? I have to answer her. Of course. Fiona squeezed her hand. But take your time. Think about what you want to say. This isn't a battle, Winnie. It's a bridge. Beatrice didn't go to the studio that day. She stayed home, rereading Clara's letter, poring over the pictures of her grandson, thinking deeply about her decision to leave. She didn't regret it. Those weeks in the Hebrides had given her a sense of freedom and self-worth that she hadn't experienced in decades. But thinking about her grandchildren, about how they would grow up without her in their lives, caused a pinching feeling in her chest. In the evening, sitting on the terrace with a glass of Fiona's best single malt, Beatrice finally decided to turn on her phone again. The calls from Daniel continued. He had called 23 times today. But there was also a new message from Clara. I hope you got my letter. Daniel is still on the island. He doesn't know I wrote to you. He's so fixated on the money that he doesn't see the main thing. Forgive him, Mother. It is harder for him to understand. Beatrice didn't answer. Not yet. She wasn't ready for Daniel. But she already felt like she could do it soon. The next day, Fiona came back from the village with news. Your son is going to leave, she said, her voice matter-of-fact. I heard him saying in the pub that he had to go back to England. Something to do with his work. Said he'd run out of time in Leeds here anyway. He's giving up? Beatrice wondered aloud, a strange mix of relief and disappointment swirling within her. I don't think so, my dear, Fiona said, sipping her tea. More like making a strategic retreat. Perhaps he's realized he can't get anywhere by direct pursuit, by simply demanding and threatening. He's probably going back to rethink his tactics. The news of Daniel's imminent departure brought mixed feelings. On the one hand, Beatrice could breathe more freely, without the constant fear of encountering him on the narrow island roads. On the other hand, she was strangely disappointed that he was leaving without speaking to her, without truly trying to understand her motives, without any genuine remorse. Did you want to meet him before he left? Fiona asked, watching Beatrice's reaction carefully. I don't know, Beatrice answered honestly, looking out at the rugged coastline. Part of me wants to explain myself, to make him truly understand. But the other part knows he's not ready to listen. He's still too angry, too focused on Clara's wedding, on his perception of what he's lost. That evening, Beatrice decided to take a walk around the village, for the first time without Fiona. Daniel should have been at the airport by now, from what Fiona had heard. The island village was especially beautiful in the evening, with the soft glow of cottage lights reflecting in the dark water of the harbor. A light breeze whispered off the sea, carrying the scent of salt and peat. People strolled leisurely along the promenade, or sat in the warmth of the brightly lit pubs. Beatrice was walking along, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere, when suddenly she noticed Daniel. He was on the other side of the street, leaning against the stone railing of the promenade, looking out to sea. His shoulders were slumped, and he looked pensive, almost defeated. Beatrice froze, not knowing what to do. Approach? Hide? He looked utterly exhausted, haggard, as if the weight of the world, or at least Clara's wedding, was pressing down on him. At that moment, an elderly islander approached him, a local fisherman, judging by his weathered hands and the faint scent of brine. They talked for a moment, the fisherman gesturing vaguely towards the cottages, and Daniel pulled out his phone, showing him something. Probably a picture of her. The old man shook his head slowly, and Daniel sighed, shrugging, before moving on down the embankment. Beatrice followed him cautiously, keeping her distance. He stopped at a small, dimly lit pub, sat down at an outdoor table, and ordered something. He took out his cell phone again, stared at the screen for a long time, then dialed a number. A moment later, Beatrice's phone, which she held tightly in her hand, vibrated. She quickly dropped the call, but her heart was pounding like crazy. In gas, Daniel put his phone down on the table, running a hand over his face. There was so much fatigue in that gesture, so much frustration, that it made Beatrice's chest ache with a maternal pang. He looked aged, drawn. Beatrice took a few steps toward him, compelled by an urge to comfort, to simply tell him she was okay. But she stopped. No, not yet. First, he had to realize what he'd done. He had to understand why she left. He had to truly, deeply understand the pain he had caused. She turned and walked quickly away before he could see her. All the way back to Fiona's cottage, Beatrice was gripped by a strange, conflicting feeling. A powerful mixture of guilt for her son's evident suffering, and a resolute, unwavering conviction that she had done the right thing. At home, she told Fiona about the meeting, her voice still trembling slightly. "You were right not to go," Fiona nodded, pouring them each a celebratory glass of whiskey. "Let him think about it. Judging by what your daughter writes, he's beginning to understand. This is a good sign, Winnie." "You think so?" Beatrice asked hesitantly, sipping the warm, smoky liquid. "I'm sure of it. Otherwise he wouldn't look so lost, so defeated. That's the look of someone whose fundamental assumptions have been shattered." The next day, Daniel did indeed leave. Fiona confirmed this by talking to the hotel where he was staying. His room was empty. But the calls didn't stop. Now he was calling from England, just as insistent, almost desperate, but with a new edge of genuine bewilderment. And 3 days later came another letter. This time from Daniel. Daniel's letter was shorter than Clara's, and written with apparent difficulty. The handwriting was uneven, some words crossed out, as if he had struggled to put his thoughts into coherent form. "Mother, I have returned to England without finding you, but I know you are somewhere in the Hebrides. I saw you last night on the waterfront. You followed me, and then you left. I don't understand why you didn't approach me, why you've been avoiding me, why you don't answer your phone. What did I do that was so terrible? Clara says we took you for granted, that we never thought about your feelings. Maybe she's right, but is that any reason to abandon a family? Is that a reason to take money that could secure your daughter's future, her wedding, and just disappear? I'm mad at you, Mom, but I also miss you. And frankly, I'm beginning to understand how you felt when I came to demand the money. I didn't mean it to sound like a demand. It's just Clara and I are having problems. Serious problems. The wedding budget is out of control, and she's a wreck. And I didn't know how to ask for help. Mess. Come back, Mom, or at least give me a call. Let's have a talk. Daniel. Tasso. Beatrice read the letter several times. So Daniel had seen her. She hadn't been as careful as she thought. But the important thing was that he was beginning to understand. He was beginning to realize his guilt, even if it was still tinged with resentment and anger, still mixed with his own problems. The ice had broken. "What are you going to do?" Fiona asked Beatrice, her voice gentle, when Beatrice showed her the letter. "I think it's time to answer them," Beatrice said, folding the letter neatly. "But not to go back. It's not time yet. And I will not allow myself to be drawn back into their drama because their wedding plans are in trouble. This is about me. And my boundaries." "I agree," Fiona nodded. "Show them you're okay, that you're happy, that you're strong. But don't be in a hurry to get back on their old track. Make them come to your new one." Beatrice sat down at the large wooden table in the living room and pulled out paper and a pen. It was time to let her children know that she was okay, that she was alive and well, and that their attitude toward her and their expectations would have to fundamentally change if they wanted her back in their lives, even in a limited capacity. It had been 3 months since Beatrice had escaped from Willow Creek. 3 months of her new life in the Outer Hebrides. 3 months in which it was as if she had lived more than she had in the previous 65 years. The island was transformed in the autumn. The summer tourists had left, leaving the villages to their true inhabitants. The sea became darker, deeper, more brooding. In the mornings, fog sometimes crept ashore, enveloping the fishing boats in a ghostly haze. Beatrice liked this meditative atmosphere even more than the bustling energy of summer. After Daniel's departure, Beatrice sent short letters to her children. To Clara, she wrote more warmly, thanking her for her understanding, telling her a little about her life here, enclosing some of her watercolor sketches of the dramatic island landscapes. To Daniel, she wrote more reservedly, but without coldness. She confirmed that everything was all right with her, that she held no grudges against him, but that she needed time for herself, time to heal and rediscover. They reacted differently to these letters. Clara sent new photos of Leo in a long, heartfelt letter in which she told Beatrice how she had changed her view of their relationship. She wrote that now she drove Leo to all his classes herself, not shifting the responsibility to neighbors or casual acquaintances. She began to truly value her own time and other people's free time. She admitted that her initial distress over the wedding budget had led her to a deeper reflection on what truly mattered in life, beyond superficial appearances. From Daniel came a short email message. "Thanks for writing, glad you're okay. We were worried. The wedding, well, it's going to be scaled back. A lot." Calls from him became less frequent, maybe once a week instead of 30 times a day. Beatrice still hadn't answered, but she was already thinking about it. She was just waiting for the right time, for the true moment of clarity, for herself and for them. Her life on the island took on a pleasant, fulfilling rhythm. In the mornings, Beatrice would walk along the shore, watching the fishermen returning from their nightly catches, their boats laden with the bounty of the sea. Then she had breakfast with Fiona on the terrace, weather permitting. 3 days a week she worked in Fiona's art studio. To her surprise, Beatrice enjoyed teaching the children not only English, through creative games and storytelling, but also the basics of drawing and painting, helping them see the world through an artist's eye. On her free days, she wandered around the island with a small sketchbook, trying to capture the raw, untamed beauty of the area. She wasn't very good at it, not by a professional standard, but Fiona insisted she had her own unique style. Naive but sincere, Winnie, full of heart. They often sat on the terrace in the evenings, watching the dramatic Hebridean sunsets, sipping whiskey, and discussing everything from local island politics to the philosophy of art, to shared memories of their youth. "You know, Winnie," Fiona said one day, her gaze warm and knowing, "you've changed so much in these few months. When you came here, you were so stiff, so burdened, so insecure. Now, look at you, you radiate a quiet confidence." Beatrice smiled. Fiona was right. She felt younger, freer, more confident than she had in decades. She had even changed outwardly. Her skin was tanned from the bracing sea air. Her hair, once tightly permed, was now grown a little longer than usual, embracing its natural wave. She had gradually swapped her conservative English clothes for brighter, looser, more comfortable garments. "It's all your influence, Fiona," Beatrice replied. gesturing to the vibrant paintings around them. "You've always been so lively, so uninhibited." "No, dear." Fiona shook her head gently. "It's all you. I just showed you the door. It was up to you to walk through it. And you ran." At the end of October, Beatrice received a letter from the lawyer she'd discreetly hired at the beginning of her Scottish adventure. She had instructed him to find a charity for the elderly, specifically one that focused on helping older people suffering from emotional abuse or financial exploitation from relatives. She wanted to work out a scheme whereby she could transfer a significant portion of her savings to it in exchange for a small but reliable annuity for life. The lawyer wrote that he had found an ideal option, the Silver Tide Foundation, a small, highly reputable charity based in Glasgow, which specializes in helping elderly people reclaim their independence and escape toxic family relationships. They offered a scheme in which Beatrice would give them £100,000. In return, she would receive a monthly allowance of £800 for the rest of her life, paid directly into a new, independent bank account. The rest of her money, about £50,000, would remain at her immediate disposal, providing a comfortable buffer for unforeseen expenses or small luxuries. It was exactly what Beatrice was looking for. Enough money for a modest but comfortable life on the island. Life was significantly cheaper here than in England, and at the same time, her money was going to a truly good cause, helping older people like herself find their own freedom. She signed all the necessary paperwork, painstakingly reviewed every clause, and sent it back to London. When the confirmation came a few weeks later, a succinct email stating that the contract had come into effect and the transfer was complete, Beatrice felt strangely, profoundly relieved. It was as if the last invisible thread tying her to her past life, to the demands and expectations of her children, had finally been severed. That same evening, sitting on the terrace and admiring a particularly beautiful sunset that painted the clouds in shades of fiery orange and soft rose, Beatrice heard a familiar tune. Her phone was ringing. Daniel's name popped up on the screen. Usually, she just watched the call go to voicemail, then deleted the notification. But today, something was different. She was ready to talk. Ready to explain. Ready to, perhaps, start building a new relationship with her son and daughter. Not as mother and demanding children, but as two adults who could respect each other's boundaries and choices. She picked up the phone and pressed the green button. "Mom!" Daniel's voice coming through the phone was so laced with surprise, so disbelieving, that Beatrice couldn't help but smile faintly. He clearly hadn't expected her to answer. "Mom, is that really you?" "Hello, Daniel," Beatrice said calmly, her voice steady and clear. "Yes, it's me." "Oh my God, you've answered." "At last," he exclaimed, a rush of relief and exasperation in his tone. "I had given up hope. How are you? Where are you? When are you coming home?" So many questions, tumbling out at once, just as she remembered him, always impatient, always in a hurry, always needing immediate answers. "I'm fine, Daniel," Beatrice answered, taking a slow, steadying breath. "I live in Scotland now, on a small island in the Outer Hebrides, right by the sea." There was a moment of silence on the other end, a pause as he processed the information. You don't plan to come back?" he stammered, disbelief evident in his voice. "But why, Mom? We all miss you. Leo's growing up so fast, you're missing everything, and Clara says he asks about you all the time." "I miss my grandchildren too, Daniel," Beatrice admitted, a genuine pang of longing in her chest. "But I need this time to myself, time to realize who I am beyond being a mother and grandmother. But you," he hesitated again, clearly struggling for the right words for an argument that would compel her return. "You've always been a mom, the best mom. Why would you want to be anything else?" That was it. That was the core of their misunderstanding, the very attitude that had driven her to leave. To him, she was only mom. A function, a role, a provider, not a person with her own wants and needs, her own identity. "Because I'm not only a mother, Daniel," Beatrice said as gently as she could, but with unwavering conviction. "I am Beatrice Holloway, a woman who enjoys painting watercolors, reading historical novels, walking along the seashore at dawn. A woman who has dreams and plans. A woman who wants to live her own life. There was a profound silence on Daniel's end. Beatrice could hear his breathing, heavy, as if he were holding back a torrent of emotion, a wave of confusion. I never thought of it that way, he said finally, his voice small, almost childlike. To me, you were always just Mom. I know, Beatrice answered, without reproach. And that's why I had to leave. To make you all realize that I don't just exist for you, that I have my own existence, independent of your needs. There was another long pause, filled only by the crackle of the phone line and the distant sound of the waves. Then, Daniel asked in a different tone, businesslike, tense, almost accusatory. What about the money, Mom? The money you took with you? For Clara's wedding? We had to cut the budget so drastically. Ah, there it was. The real crux of his concern, laid bare. It was the money he cared about most, the financial disruption to their plans. I've managed it, Daniel, Beatrice said calmly, feeling a surge of quiet power. I've disposed of it. His voice got noticeably higher, laced with incredulity and outrage. Disposed of it? What do you mean, disposed? You spent it? All of it? No, I didn't spend it all on myself, Daniel, Beatrice corrected, keeping her voice even, devoid of any emotional charge. I put the significant portion of it into a charity that helps elderly people who suffer from emotionally abusive or financially exploitative relatives. In return, they provide me with a monthly annuity for my own modest living expenses here. What? He seemed stunned, genuinely taken aback. What emotional abuse, Mom? What are you talking about? What's been going on in our family for years, Daniel? Beatrice answered, trying to speak softly but firmly. You and Clara took me for granted. You used my time, my energy, my love, and never once thought about what I wanted for myself. And when I refused to simply hand over the last significant thing I had left, my savings, you called me selfish, unloving. I didn't. He began to protest, but then his voice trailed off. There was a long, awkward silence. Then he said more quietly, almost a whisper, Maybe you're right. Clara said something like that we took you for granted, that we never thought about your feelings. That admission, incomplete though it was, surprised Beatrice. Perhaps Daniel had begun to realize something during these months of her absence, during his futile search. What now? He asked after a long pause, his voice sounding hollow. What about the money? You say you put it into a fund? Yes, Beatrice confirmed. Most of it. In exchange, the fund will pay me a small monthly allowance, enough for a modest, comfortable life here in Scotland. So you really don't plan to go back? There was so much confusion, so much raw vulnerability in his voice now that Beatrice felt a genuine pang of sympathy for him. He was a grown man, but in this moment he sounded utterly lost. Not yet, Daniel, Beatrice said gently. I'm happy here. I've found work, friends, hobbies. For the first time in years, I feel free, truly free. Free. But what about us? He asked, his voice cracking slightly. What about the grandchildren? Leo misses you desperately. I'm not disappearing from your life forever, Daniel, Beatrice said softly. I just won't live for you anymore. I won't sacrifice my interests, my time, my money for your convenience. If you want me in your life, it will be on my terms, as someone who deserves respect and has the right to make my own decisions. There was a long, heavy pause. Beatrice could hear Daniel breathing heavily, as if trying to cope with a profound emotional shift, a worldview utterly upended. Did you really give all the money to that fund? He finally asked, the raw desperation returning. Most of it, Beatrice repeated, her voice firm. It was my decision, Daniel, my right to use what I'd earned, What Arthur and I saved, as I saw fit. But it was Dad's money too, he exclaimed with sudden fervor, a flash of his old anger. It was for the family, for Clara's wedding, for Leo's future. No, Daniel, Beatrice said firmly, cutting him off. It was my and Arthur's money, our savings, which we had saved up all our lives. And Arthur never once said it was only for the family, or that I had no say in it. He wanted me to be provided for when he died, so I could have a decent life, so I could be secure. And you call that a decent life? There was bitterness in his voice now, raw and resentful. Running away from your family? Hiding in some remote Scottish village? Yes, Daniel, Beatrice answered calmly. That is a decent life. A life in which I decide what to do with my time, my money, my love. A life in which I am respected as a person, not used as a free babysitter and an ATM. A life where I am truly seen. Her words seemed to finally hit their mark. There was a long, stunned silence, after which Daniel spoke in a different tone, quiet, almost contrite, edged with genuine guilt. Mother, I didn't want you to feel this way. I didn't want you to think we were using you. I know you didn't consciously set out to cause harm, Beatrice said softly. But that's just the way it became. Both you and Clara have a lot of rethinking to do. You need to realize that parents aren't a free resource forever. That we have our own lives, our own dreams, our own desires. Clara seems to have figured some of it out. She has, Daniel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. She talks about it a lot. About how we took you for granted, that we never thought about your feelings, only our own needs. And you, Daniel, do you understand? There was a long, drawn-out pause again. Then he sighed, a deep, shuddering breath. I think I'm beginning to understand, especially after what you said about the charity. That was like a slap in the face, an eye-opener. Did you really think that we were, emotionally abusing you? Beatrice hesitated. Maybe the wording had been too harsh. But in essence, yes, that's what had been going on for years. Perhaps not consciously, she said finally, choosing her words carefully. But the result was exactly that. I felt used, unwanted, invisible, as if my only value was in what I could do for you, what I could provide. I'm sorry, Mom, he said. And there was a sincerity in his voice that Beatrice hadn't heard in years. A genuine crack in his armor of entitlement. I'm really sorry, I didn't realize. You do now, Beatrice finished softly. And that's the main thing. They talked some more. About Leo, about Clara's wedding, which Daniel admitted was now a much smaller, more intimate affair, about his own work, and even the financial problems he and Clara were facing due to their overspending. He didn't go into passing details, but acknowledging their existence, their struggles, was an important step. Before saying goodbye, he asked, his voice hesitant, Mom, are you ever coming back? I don't know, Daniel, Beatrice answered honestly. Maybe someday. But not for good. Maybe I'll come and visit my grandchildren. I'd like that. I'd like that too, he said quietly. I'd like to come visit you, see how you live, to meet Fiona. To understand. The suggestion surprised Beatrice. Daniel had always been so self-sufficient, so focused on his own life, his own circle, that the thought of his interest in her new reality, her new friends, seemed utterly alien. Of course, Beatrice replied, a faint smile touching her lips. You can come over when you're ready. When you're truly ready to see me, not just your mother. Thank you, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And forgive me for everything. Beatrice sat on the terrace for a long time afterward, the phone clutched in her hand, looking up at the stars which seemed especially bright here, away from the city lights of Willow Creek. Fiona joined her, bringing out another bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. From the look on your face, she said, pouring the golden liquid, the conversation went well. Better than I expected, Beatrice admitted, sipping her whiskey slowly. I think he's really starting to understand that I'm not just his mother, that I have a right to my own life, my own choices. Bravo! Fiona raised her glass. To new beginnings and old endings, Winnie. They clinked glasses and took a sip. The whiskey was sweet, with a distinct, lingering aftertaste of peat smoke, just like today's conversation. You know, Beatrice said, looking out at the dark, vast expanse of the sea below. When I left England, I thought I was running away from something. From the demands of the children, from feeling used, from the emptiness of my life. But now I realize I was actually running to something. The real me. The life I always wanted but was afraid to admit, even to myself. Better late than never, my dear, Fiona said philosophically. Some people live their whole lives without truly knowing who they really are, without daring to be who they're meant to be. You found your courage. Do you think, Beatrice asked, turning to Fiona, a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, that I could ever go back? Not permanently, of course. Just visit them. Be a part of their lives. But on my own terms? Of course you can, Fiona answered confidently, her gaze unwavering. But only when they truly understand and accept your independence. When they stop seeing you only as a convenient resource. When they learn to respect your boundaries. And it sounds like Daniel, at least, is on that path. And Clara already there. Daniel offered to come here, Beatrice said, a genuine smile spreading across her face. To meet you, to see my new life. Oh la! Fiona exclaimed with a theatrical wave of her hand, her eyes twinkling mischievously. That's progress already. Maybe he's not as hopeless as we thought, We'll have to tidy up the studio, make it look extra artistic. They laughed, a joyful, uninhibited sound that echoed across the dark terrace. And suddenly, Beatrice felt a lightness, a profound sense of release that she had never felt in her entire life. It was as if the last, invisible weight had finally been lifted from her shoulders. A few weeks after that conversation, Clara called. Her voice was hesitant, gentle. Mom? I heard you talk to Daniel. He seemed really shaken, but also different, calmer. We had a good talk, Beatrice confirmed. A long overdue one. He told me about the charity, Clara continued, her voice softer still. About you feeling used. Mom, I'm so sorry. I can't stop thinking about it. About how selfish we were, how much stress we put on you. Especially with the wedding. It's been humbling. It's okay, Clara, Beatrice said, a warmth spreading through her chest. This was genuine. This was what she had longed for. It was hard, but it led me here, to a place where I'm truly happy. I wish you hadn't had to run away for us to see it, Clara whispered, a note of deep regret in her voice. The wedding was a disaster without you. Not because of the money, but because the whole thing felt empty without your calm presence. I realized I was trying to buy happiness, not create it. And now? Beatrice asked. Now, we're having a much smaller, quieter ceremony next month, Clara said, a new, grounded tone in her voice. Just family and close friends. No huge expenses. No endless demands. It feels right. It feels like our wedding, not some grand production. And I actually miss you, Mom, not just your help. I miss you too, darling, Beatrice admitted, her voice thick with emotion. And I miss Leo very much. How is he? Clara brightened, and they talked for a long time about Leo's latest milestones, his funny sayings, his boundless energy. It was a normal conversation, filled with genuine affection, devoid of demands or expectations. It felt like a fresh beginning. A few months later, Daniel took Beatrice up on her offer. He came to the island, alone, for a long weekend. Beatrice, still cautious, met him at the ferry terminal. He looked less haggard than before, a quiet seriousness in his eyes. Fiona, true to her word, had tidied the studio and even baked a traditional Scottish shortbread for his arrival. The visit was surprisingly good. Daniel spent hours just listening, as Beatrice and Fiona recounted stories of island life, of her painting classes, of the dramatic storms and the peaceful sunsets. He played with Leo's latest drawings that Clara had sent. He walked along the beach with Beatrice, and for the first time asked her about her dreams, her feelings. He looked at her art, not with judgment, but with curiosity. He saw the transformation in her, the peace, the quiet joy. He saw Beatrice Holloway, the woman. Before he left, Daniel hugged her tightly. "Mom," he murmured into her shoulder, I really get it now. I'm so sorry. About everything." It was the most sincere apology he had ever given her. The years that followed were the happiest Beatrice had ever known. She never returned to Willow Creek permanently, maintaining her peaceful, independent life in the Outer Hebrides. Her cottage with Fiona became her sanctuary, a place where she could paint, read, walk the wild beaches, and simply be. The annuity from the Silvertide Foundation, combined with a little income from helping Fiona teach English through art, provided her with a comfortable, stress-free existence. She was no longer burdened by financial anxieties, nor by the endless demands of others. Her savings, once a source of familial conflict, now funded her freedom and helped others like her. Her relationship with Clara and Daniel slowly, steadily, healed. It was a new kind of relationship, built on respect and understanding rather than obligation. Clara, softened by her own experiences and guided by the insights she gained from therapy, became a truly thoughtful daughter. She would call regularly, sharing news of Leo and her now happily married life, always asking about Beatrice's day, her latest painting, her health. She never again asked for money or imposed demands. Instead, she offered, genuine and loving, "Mom, if you ever need anything, please just say the word." She even sent Beatrice a small, hand-painted watercolor set for Christmas one year, acknowledging Beatrice's newfound passion. Daniel, too, continued his path of growth. His visit to the island had been a turning point. He began to call Beatrice not out of desperation or demand, but out of genuine interest. He spoke openly about his struggles at work, his anxieties about providing for his family, and, surprisingly, even sought her advice on various life matters. He realized that his mother wasn't just a resource, but a wellspring of wisdom and quiet strength. He and Clara organized regular video calls, ensuring Beatrice could see Leo growing up, waving and blowing kisses at the screen. These calls, filled with genuine laughter and heartfelt connection, became cherished moments. Beatrice continued to visit Willow Creek, but always on her own terms. She would fly in for a week or two, staying in a charming local inn, rather than with her children. She spent her time catching up with Mrs. Flanders, visiting her favorite old library, and, most importantly, doting on Leo. She would take him to the park, read him stories, bake his favorite cookies, not out of obligation, but out of pure, unadulterated joy. Clara and Daniel, too, began to visit her in the Hebrides, sometimes bringing Leo, their visits planned meticulously in advance, respecting Beatrice's time and her new life. They would walk the windswept beaches, marvel at the raw beauty of the island, and sit with Beatrice and Fiona, listening to their stories. They learned to appreciate the quiet, independent woman their mother had become. Beatrice herself, in her 70s and then her 80s, became a beacon of quiet resilience. Her paintings, once amateurish, developed a distinct, soulful style, capturing the unique light and landscape of the Outer Hebrides. She even had a small exhibition at a local gallery on the island, a proud moment Fiona orchestrated, attended by her new island friends, and, surprisingly, a beaming Clara and Daniel, who flew in just for the occasion. Looking back, Beatrice often reflected on the audacious step she had taken that sunny Tuesday morning in Willow Creek. It had been terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly necessary. She had risked everything, her comfort, her family's approval, her familiar world, to save herself. And in doing so, she had not only found her own freedom and happiness, but had inadvertently taught her children a profound lesson: that love is not about taking, but about respecting. That true connection flourishes not in dependence, but in the space where individuals are free to live their own stories. Beatrice Holloway, the unassuming retired librarian, had become the author of her own remarkable life. Her story, once defined by the roles she played for others, was now a vibrant, self-written narrative of courage, rediscovery, and the enduring power of choosing oneself. She was no longer just a mother, a grandmother, or a widow. She was Beatrice, whole, free, and finally, truly alive.